So let's just take some calls. People love asking. So let's do it. You're on Liberty and Justice. You're on NARSOL in Action with Ashley Cloud from the Liberty and Justice Coalition. Go ahead. All right. I'm going to put you on hold and come back to you. Area code 818, you're on in action. I'll get it right here sooner or later. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'm in Los Angeles. I am familiar with ACSOL. I've been participating in their meetings and conference. This is the first time I've really participated with NARSOL. I do appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much. I grew up in New Mexico. I live in northern New Mexico. Right now I'm living in Southern California. Convicted of a felony, registrant. My probation is just about up in May. I would like to go visit my mom and eventually move back to New Mexico. I'm not sure with the tiered registration what's happening with me. The case that you're talking about now seems very relevant to me. I have some internet, it's an internet case, not CP, but internet case. And so everything that you're talking about is brand new to me. I wanted to see if you can give me some references so I can, get up to speed on what these issues are.
Well, let me say that you may want to contact Ashley in terms of possibly some personal representation because we would be more than delighted to talk to you, but it may be a little bit more complicated for this call. The baseline is when you come here, they're going to tell you have to register because you're registering in California. And then we're going to have to fight depending on if your crime is equivalent. And unless you feel like telling the listening audience what your crime is and all the details, and we'd have to go through that, we don't know whether you would translate to a registrable offense here in New Mexico. Was it electronic solicitation? Can you say that much? What was the essence of the conviction?
Yeah, essentially that's it. So the terminology in California is a 288, I believe. Well, I don't want to get into the sub numbers because I could get it wrong. The description is harmful matter to a minor. So
Was there
communications with a minor.
were there images exchanged or was sex proposition requested?
No, just text and sex proposition. Well, not explicit sex proposition. There was I went to go visit.
You may have a very good cause of action for not having to register if you were to come here. I'm going to take down your number and do you mind if we call you after the program in the next day or so? Because this
Not
is
at all.
something where you might be able to be helped. So I've got you the number you're calling in from. Is that a
Great.
real number or is that a fake number?
No, it's my cell phone. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we've got your number here, and I'll put you on the list for a call back. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Area code 505. You're on NARSOL with Ashley Cloud.
Hi, Ashley. My name is Ed.
Hi.
I'm from Albuquerque. And
Hi, Ed
I
from
followed
Albuquerque.
the legislation. Hang on just a second. I followed the legislation through the legislature pretty closely. Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. And I'm worried about what will happen in the long session because HB 237 and 43 just, I think at least for 237, they just ran out of time. It never made it through the Justice Committee in the Senate. What are the plans for that, or what's the plan of attack? Because I'm really interested in, because these people are going to come back again next year, and try to push through this legislation. I'm just wondering what
Ed, you're completely right.
Hello?
They will come back. You're completely right. They will come back. They will come back year after year after year as they've been doing since 2007. You're not completely right that they just simply ran out of time. There was more than enough time to pass this had they wanted to, and I'm going to mute you because of all the background noise that's coming in. But there was more than enough time to get this through the legislative process. For those looking in from the outside, when something crosses over from the House to the Senate in the final 3, 4, 5 days, they say it's doomed. No, it's not doomed. What they do is they give it one committee assignment, and then that committee, if it's a high priority legislation from the governor and from the attorney general, that committee is put under extreme pressure to hear that legislation and to give it a hearing. It didn't get a hearing because of the work that was done, not because there was not sufficient time. There was a ton of work, analyses put in, and personal appeals made, and they decided not to hear. So the plan of action would be exactly what the plan has been since 2007. The plan of action would be that we would continue to hope that the people of New Mexico elect enlightened lawmakers to at least in sufficient quantity that we have enough to work with in key positions, and we'll continue to try to provide valid information to those enlightened lawmakers, and we'll continue to try to derail their legislation that they put forward as bad public policy. And that's what we would. Our plan is always the same. There's no deviation. We are always in the killing business when there's a bad public policy proposed, and we try to get support from whomever we can. Usually it's not from the conservative side, but sometimes it is. We get some support from conservatives, but we derail legislation with good information, good relationships, and with hard work. That's what happens, and that'll be the plan for 2021. Did you have anything to add, Ashley?
The only thing I would add is that we're already starting to work on legislation for 2021 and what we're going to need to derail because like Larry said, we know this bill is going to come back. We know several of the bills are going to come back, but we're already talking to the Defense Lawyers Association, ACLU, and several other key organizations as well, trying to band together and anticipate what's going to come up and utilize those key relationships and everything else that Larry's referring to derail these bills. So
Well,
we're already prepared.
and in addition, we're the only state that has an alternate piece of legislation. We didn't roll it out this year because it was a session where only bills that were messaged by the governor's office could be considered. But we have an alternative bill, and in the long session, if it needs to be introduced, we will have no problem getting an alternate bill introduced. And that's something that no other state generally does because they don't have the capacity to write an alternate bill that anyone has enough confidence in that they can get a sponsor for. But if there is a return of this bill, which we expect there will be, we will either have our alternate bill that we will file simultaneously, or we will seek at a key point in the process to substitute our bill for their bad bill, or we will tack it on as amendment to their bad. I mean, there's a whole number of things we will do. But just because they're going to bring it back doesn't mean they're going to be able to pass it. They've been trying since 2007 to pass things, including civil commitment here. So, I mean, sure, they'll come back. I don't want to sound arrogant about it, but we expect them to come back and keep trying.
We do. And we
So,
intend to fight them every step of the way.
all right. Well, let's go to another call. This one's been holding for a very long time. 810. You're on with Ashley Cloud.
I'm sorry to bother you. I had called before. I was looking for a Pennsylvania lawyer because it's something that you talked about in Mexico or New Mexico, but it applies here in Pennsylvania too. Is that I moved here and never had a hearing, so there was no due process. And when I looked at my last registration, it says, "Well, you're registered for 15 years here." I'm like, "Well, who and when was that decided?" Plus, we've got so much going on in there's 5 cases that are before the Supreme Court right now in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of issues, like moving from, and I understand that's being challenged too. Like if in Michigan, I wouldn't be on the registry, but then move to Pennsylvania, that would be increasing, it would still be an ex post facto thing, the way I understand it. And the fact that there's the start date they used happened to be the day I moved here, not the 10 years I've already done on a registry. Is that being challenged at all in any state or?
Those are great questions. I'm going to put you in the mute status so that we don't get background, and then I'll try to go through them. In terms of your registration obligation in Pennsylvania, always think of it as comparable if you since it's a civil regulatory scheme until the court says it isn't. Now in Pennsylvania, you're right. There's a lot of litigation, and all that could change because the Munez decision came down, and there's already been some findings about the unconstitutionality of the registry in Pennsylvania. But Pennsylvania may not have that clause that says it has to be an equivalent offense that to trigger a duty. Pennsylvania may have a clause that says if you have to register anywhere, you have to register there. Or they may have a clause that says something different, like if you have your tier system in Pennsylvania went into effect in 2012, and prior to that, if I remember right, it was just a 10-year obligation. But a state choosing you to give you whether they choose to give you credit for time in another jurisdiction, that's entirely up to the legislature, or if some successful challenge it goes through the courts and they say that you have to give them credit. But if that's not on the books, you're not going to get credit. But everybody in Pennsylvania, you've got the opportunity with all these cases that are before the Supreme Court that there could be some remarkable changes come about in registration in Pennsylvania. But actually, I think I'll let you go with anything I didn't cover.
No, I think that pretty much sums it up and maybe what it is. Do we have any Pennsylvania lawyers that are working on any of that stuff?
Well, the lead of all that has been public of Philadelphia, but it's more than one person can do. So there's been a team of lawyers working on these various challenges, and then we had a lawyer named Leah Bickerton that was out of the Pittsburgh area, which is Allegheny County. She took a lot of questions for a while. I think she got overwhelmed with the number of people that once she's on one of these phone calls, her next 2 weeks was tied up with people with registry questions. So I've just put her under the bus again. But you can look up the attorney Leah Bickerton, and she has an enormous amount of experience and knowledge, and there's a no nonsense. She actually gives you short answers if you say keep them short. I remember, Andy, you remember she gave me a one-word answer, yes. I said, is that possible? She said, yes. And I said, do you want to
Yes.
expand on it? She said, no. Uh, but yeah, I don't feel like that Pennsylvania should be uh, for us to go too deep into, because there's so much going on that we don't understand the challenges there, and it's really time for them to have another program on NARSOL. And they have a group there, Teresa Robertson. I mean, you could reach out to the local affiliate in Pennsylvania, and they would probably be more helpful than what we can be. So, all right, let's take a call from Fred Flintstone. You're on NARSOL in action.
Yes. How you doing? Thank you for taking my call. Two-part question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're here.
Hello? Okay. Sort of two-part question. I'm in Florida. What happens if someone from Florida would move to Michigan with like a 1990s conviction? Would they still have to register from being out of state or not? And with your New Mexico law, the Florida charge was attempted lewd and lascivious on a child under 16. So that's the two parts about having to register in Michigan with a 90s conviction after this court case, and New Mexico law.
When in the 90s? What year?
Excuse me?
What year in the 90s?
98, 98, the crime happened. 99 was the conviction.
Okay. Larry,
When
I'll
did you
let you
get off?
field those.
When did you get off all obligations related to that crime? When did you get off paper?
It was 3 years afterwards.
Okay, well then
90, so it'd be 2002.
okay, if you were in completion of all obligations related to your offense by July 1, 2005, the worst case scenario would be that you would be under our registry version 1. which would be either an annual obligation once a year for 10 years. So it'd be an annual obligation once a year for 20 years. You would get no credit for any of the time you spend in registering. So you'd be starting out 1 or 2 years, what way, either 10 or 20 years from scratch. Uh, the translation, it could be. I mean, we can't get deep enough into it because it's based on
Right.
what you actually did, the conduct that led to the conviction. So it could be if you made obscene phone calls to a minor in Georgia, they would put you on the registry. We could quickly translate that if that's all you did in Georgia, you wouldn't have to register here. We wouldn't have to do a deep analysis, but the crime you described would require a little fact finding to figure out what the factual basis was for that was underlying your conviction. So you might have a 10-year, you might have a 20-year, and you might have no registration obligation at all as far as New Mexico. For Michigan, if the legislature takes no action whatsoever, which, as the lawyer alluded to, is an unlikely scenario. But if they were to take no action at all, anyone who with conduct that predated 2011, as the way he explained it, wouldn't have a registration obligation because the injunction would go in play in force. And I intended to ask the question. We ran short of time. I was going to ask, isn't this an invitation for U-Haul buses, U-Hauls and buses and everything to start making a direct assault on the state of Michigan? Because if I had to register in Florida, and I could drive to Michigan and didn't have to register, I sure as hell would be driving there. And I know people are going to say, well, Larry, don't you understand? Florida doesn't release you from the registry. Well, Florida may not take your name off of the website. I get that. But what they do is they don't have any obligation. You have no obligation to pay Florida any money. You have no obligation to report to the registry office. You have no obligation to be constrained where you can live. You have no obligation to the state of Florida. So if all I had to do was be on the website and I could live in a state where I had no reporting or no constraints, now which would you choose?
Right. Well, I looked into Ohio years ago. Ohio had a law. After 20 years, they gave you credit for on the time whatever state you come from. If you moved to Ohio, they gave you credit, and after 20 years, you were done. And I don't know if they changed that or not. Now I know in Florida, what they're doing now in Florida is, and it was just in the newspaper again, another county. They're taking anybody that didn't register their license plate for their car, or rental car, or relative's car that's at their house. They're violating them people because it's now coming up on the 25 years where people can petition to get off the registry. And these people that they're nailing had convictions back in the late 90s or in the 90s and in the early 2000s where they're coming up on that time zone. And the way the law is, any conviction, any subsequent, if ever you've been arrested after you completed your sentence, that stops your timeline. That makes it all restart again. So they're really screwing with people here in Florida.
Well, and if that's in the statute, so we don't have anything, nothing tolls you in Mexico. I mean, if you've got a 20-year obligation and you spend all 20 years in prison, now the DPS is going to argue that you have to register 20 times. Well, they may have a credible argument there, but I'm going to take the position you did your registration, you complete the period passed, but there's nothing in statute that says that there's any time told. So in Florida, I don't know what they have down there, but to answer your question, you could conceivably have a 10 or 20-year obligation in New Mexico, and in Michigan, it's too murky.
But New Mexico would be level 1 though.
We don't have a level system. We don't have a level system here.
Oh, okay.
There's no distinguishing
Right.
between the offenders here. It's you would have a 10 or 20-year period, but we don't refer to them as levels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they don't have levels there in Florida either. They have like lifetime and that's it, or 25 years, I guess, or lifetime now. But they keep changing. When I first got on, it was 5 years, then it went to 10 years, and then I guess 20 and 25, and Florida's just a bunch of BS.
So I'm going to try to take one more caller before we shut down. So I appreciate your call.
You.
Thank you. So I'm going to do one more call here from Erica 321. Go.
Yeah, the only question I actually have is thought I heard, I believe it was you, say something earlier on, like an hour and a half ago, about an upcoming phone call and who was going to be on that phone call? Or did I misunderstand what you were saying?
Did I say
An
that,
upcoming
Andy?
NARSOL calling call.
We try to do these on a more regular basis than what they've occurred since Halloween, but we will be seeking program material and people to be on the call. I think we are overdue to talk about Pennsylvania. We're overdue to talk about Illinois. There's a lot going on in Illinois. So I'd like to put more of these together, but it's quite an undertaking to line up the guests, to promote it and organize the questions. These questions don't just flow when I'm sitting here. I put these questions together. I ask the attorneys, are they prepared to answer them? And we go back and forth to make sure that they understand what we're looking for. So it's quite an undertaking. We just don't sign on the air and start rambling. It's a preparation process that goes into getting one of these launched.
I
So I
understand
don't
that. But
yeah,
the answer
I
to
don't
my
have a
question, the answer
I
to my
don't
question,
I don't have a schedule yet, but we will be doing more calls, and if you're on our email blast list, you'll get notice when we have the next one, but there's not one scheduled at the moment.
I am not on your email blast. I am not on email. I am not on the
What
internet.
how did you find out about this one?
From Barbara in St. Pete
Oh,
through Caution Click.
yeah, and there's a possibility of having text alerts by phone, and we've discussed that, and I'm so don't know what it would take to set up that, but that's certainly something that I would like to have looked at. We've got a tech guru here. Why can't we do text alerts, Andy? Why can't we do text alerts to people who don't have email?
We totally can.
What would it be involved in setting up a text alert people could sign up for?
I mean, I've done it for Georgia a number of times and kind of more like just playing around with it. It's not hard to do. You just have to craft a slightly different message, that kind of fits into a hundred something characters instead of, a 5,000 word email message. It's not expensive and it's doable.
I think that for those who don't have access to getting the information, we should seriously consider that. Every time you add another a step of complexity, it's more steps that have to be accomplished before you can launch. But this is not the first time we've heard that. All right. Well, I'm gonna let one more call
Right.
on from New Mexico. Thank you for listening. And did anybody claim the prize, Andy?
Nobody claimed the prize.
Do you want to draw another one? Because there's still people left here.
Let's go to the next one, 5387.
Five, three,
And
eight,
you've got
seven.
you've got
This,
you've got seconds to try and claim
yeah,
this.
yeah. Because otherwise, I'm just going to decide to give it to one of these people that didn't show up. All right. So I know who this is. This is from the land of enchantment. David from New Mexico. You're on NARSOL in action with Ashley Cloud. David, fell asleep.
No, I'm here. I'm here. First and foremost, I want to thank you tremendously for all of your efforts. I know you don't hear it enough, so thank you very much. So
Thank
I'll
you.
try to keep this very brief because I shouldn't be long-winded. I was convicted in 2004 in Colorado I was convicted to and sentenced to a 4-year indeterminate sentence. I served 8.5 years of that 4-year indeterminate sentence. My charges consist of an F3, which carries a 20-year mandatory supervision. But when I got to Colorado, my parole officer put it in as a 10-year supervision, is what he recorded into the paperwork. So I've been kicking around the idea of this. Well, I've been listening to y'all talk about the 5-year review. I'm wondering if I should, one of the questions is I wonder if I should even bother aggravating this situation or just let the 10 years expire and be released, or should I go back to Colorado and address this thing prior to the 20 years that I know an F3 carries?
Well, I can make it
so
simple for you, David.
that's
On the 5-year review, you don't get that. You're not a New Mexico convicted person, so you need to put that out of your mind once. Okay, actually, you
all
can take
right,
it
out of
forever.
my
But
mind.
out
So
of your mind
the
Okay.
forever.
second thing I heard you all talking about, was good time. In Colorado, sex offenders do not receive good time. Uh, Now, all other prisoners receive good time, especially the ones that engage in whatever programs or educational programs, or they receive up to X amount of time of good time. I never received any good time. Is that an addressable issue?
No, it's not an addressable issue because even the good time here is by statute, and that was part of the legislation they tried to pass too, was that they took away good time from sex offenders. So there, it's not addressable because it's statutory. However, let me ask you something on the 10-year. Here in New Mexico, because you're here on Interstate Compact, here in New Mexico, is it showing that you
Correct.
discharge at the 10-year mark?
No, because he's on
Yes.
indeterminate. You're on.
According-
They have a positive release date
Yes,
on your hip.
well, it within the paperwork that I signed at my parole office that day, the first day I showed up, he signed me up for 10 years worth of supervision and ankle bracelet, and there is an end date on that paperwork.
Well, you might just sit back and see if they
Now
release you
I'm
after 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
right, and so I'm still in translation. I've been in translation according to the sheriff's department for the past 6 years.
One will have
They've
nothing to
not.
do with the other.
I'm still
One will have
okay.
nothing to do with the other. You will
Yeah,
continue to
Okay.
you'll continue to have to register after you get off supervision. But how they translate your out-of-state sex offense will have nothing to do with how long you're supervised. That's all determined by the state that convicted you.
and
Okay.
if here on
Okay.
paper they're showing that you're discharged at the 10-year mark, that's what they'll submit, a
Yes.
letter of discharge to Colorado. And that's, I'm with Larry. I think you should just totally see if they do it.
Well, they do a notice of case
Okay.
closure is what they would do.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
they will.
if Colorado doesn't want the case closed, they'll say, well, not so fast. That case doesn't get
Right.
closed. It's indeterminate. But New Mexico's out of the loop on everything except for the registration.
Okay. Well, I recently called the head office over in Clovis, and I spoke with one of the head supervisors, and she said, "How much longer are you on?" I said, "That's a good question." And so she looked it up on the computer, and she said, "You're on for 4 more years. If you just lay low for 4 more years, you're good." So I got it straight from them. That's what
Yeah,
they're looking
I
at
would
on their
just let that
computer
ride.
screen.
Yeah, no,
All
I
right.
know what that looks
All
like in
right.
there, so
Well,
I would let it ride.
all right. Sounds good. Well, I won't take any more of your time. I appreciate you all so much, and I appreciate you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Take care.
Larry, we do have a winner.
All right, we'll do.
We do have a winner. Let's hear that drum roll. Who won illustrious prize?
An individual named Mike from the 916 area code. And I sent you the information.
I will process that and get him registered for the conference if he so desires.
Very well.
So I see that number in my messages.
Yep.
Winner. Well, are we ready to shut down this podcast? Ashley, did
We
you have
are.
any closing words? Because Andy's past his bedtime.
It's late where you're at, Andy.
Yes, it is.
Not,
I'm ready for bed.
I hear you. Well, I want to thank everybody that hung with us this long and that we still had questions going into this hour. I'm deeply appreciative for everybody out there and their support. And thank you, Larry, as always, and thank you, Andy, as always.
Thank you.
Well, we had over 50 hanging in here to the very end, so that's so all right.
And I'm sorry about the troubles with YouTube because that just went beyond me. Just couldn't get connected.
Well, they just had to call in on the old-fashioned phone if they wanted to continue listening, right?
That is correct.
So, well, all right. Well, we're going to sign off, and hopefully we'll get another one of these programs put together. I'm seeking volunteers to do what I do, and you don't have to do it the same way I do it. There may be a different way that's more efficient and more exciting than all the work I put into it. But I tend to want to go through questions that have been prepared. I don't like to have long monologues and all this storytelling. So I'm trying to cover a lot of territory. I let a lot of storytelling go on tonight that I really shouldn't have. But you're always trying to balance one way or the other. If you cut off the attorney too soon, they don't want to come back. And so I was a little tolerant of storytelling tonight. But all right, everybody, this is it.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night from NARSOL.
Good night.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. I can figure out how I'll do it. I hit off.
This session is no longer being recorded.
That's done. And there's people are beginning to hang up that were still there. So I can unmute everybody and see if anybody wants to say anything.
Q&A session is over.